This is A Geek Leader. Welcome to episode 148 of the Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and I know a lot of people are shaking up a little bit right now with coronavirus and things that are going on. So if you are experiencing anything, definitely thoughts and prayers go out to you. Hopefully all is well, and we'll get through this together. Just remember to be nice to all those around you. You never know what people are going through. There's amplified stress right now in people's lives with schools being canceled and events being canceled and everything else. Which kind of leads me into one of our sponsors, SplashTop, who we've talked about a lot. But I wanted to, kind of go off script a little bit and just to say, their products do help people when they are working remotely, and definitely check their stuff out. And if you are a company that's facing challenging with employees working from home at a scale that's never been seen before, such as we're seeing right now, and you need remote desktop solutions or some type of remote access, SplashTop is a tool that can definitely help you out. It's fast, simple, scalable, and it enables employees to remotely work from computers and be productive while working at home. There's an unprecedented number of people and companies setting up remote access software this week and last week and next week. And in response to this demand, SplashTop is not only giving their normal 20% discount to a Geek Leader folks, they're also introducing 50% bulk licenses for companies that are trying to get into this remote working from home situations and don't know how to do it. SplashTop is helping people out in this crisis. So definitely check out SplashTop. You can go to geekleader.com/SplashTop to get a 30-day free trial. Plus, they're doing 50% bulk licenses and 20% off for individual licenses right now. That's at geekleader.com/SplashTop. Definitely one of my favorite companies. Check them out for sure. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Kim Bohr. She's the author of a book I've got sitting in front of me called Success, Failures, and Lessons Learned. It's a career journal, and it's one of those books you have to work through, so we're going to do that. She's a in-demand speaker, the CEO of a company called Innovare Group, which is a firm that helps reorganize leaders and helps diagnose and repair some of the disconnects between leaders and the organization. They also help accelerate strategies and provide talent execution and lots of other cool stuff that her group works on. So, Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, John. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Tell the audience a little bit about kind of what your journey's been like, your career, and kind of how you got to where you are today, just so we can have some context for the conversation going forward.
Yeah, so I've always considered myself a student of business. I've always been fascinated by how business operates, how organizations grow, mergers, acquisitions, all that stuff. So I've always wanted to put myself in the middle of those things. And then I've also really been fascinated by leadership. And I really strongly believe the two go hand in hand. You can't have a strong business culture and engagement without strong leadership. And so those have always been two I'm extremely passionate about. And so early on in my career, I had really poor leaders as mentors, if you will. And then I ultimately was a really poor leader myself. And what I realized was that I like to say sometimes it was almost like I had my team, rebelling against me. And so I went to my leadership to ask for feedback, and they really couldn't give me any. And in hindsight, I realized it was because they didn't really have the skills they needed either to lead well. So I set off on my own and I started to research where could I find help? And I came across this great book that's still around today from Marshall Goldsmith, which is What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And it was a catalyst for me to start to take on my own leadership style and to really transform what I could be and to get my team actually wanting to work with me. And so from that, I engaged an executive coach, and we did, work with the team itself, and the rest is kind of history. But it became such a passion point for me because I loved to lead, and yet I didn't have all the skills I needed to do it well. And so that's been an element of the journey. And so over my career, I've held many different true business roles. So I've held operations roles. I've had all sorts of functional areas report up to me. So I'm really a cross-functional leader. And then when I decided it was time to launch my own firm, it was really from the culmination of watching so many of those disconnects happen inside organizations where the people and the process just aren't aligned. And I like to say, solid strategy won't survive poor execution. And the execution breakdown is in those two areas. And so that's become a real passion point for me, is trying to help organizations see the alignment needed, and then really make the investments in those two areas of people and process in order to be very successful.
Interesting. So were you nervous starting your own firm? Like, what was that decision like? What was running through your head?
I wasn't exactly nervous. I was excited. And I had felt like every different position I had, different companies I'd worked with, I felt like I was always gaining some experience to take me to that place. So I always knew I wanted to get to this place. I just didn't. It was taking in enough information to get to a point where I felt like I was ready. And not that I was ready that I didn't have more to learn. I just was ready to go and now go on this learning journey. And it's been an incredible learning journey. I mean, the reason the book is titled Successes, Failures, and Lessons Learned is because of the realization of that. That's how we function, right? We function in these cycles of accepting that where we're at today is because of what we've been able to experience. And so, yeah, it was scary, and it's not an easy ride to start your own business, but there's so much about it when you believe in what you do that makes it really, really worthwhile.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I guess I've had a similar background when it comes to leadership and business and the importance of it. And you mentioned that you've had some bad leaders, and that you yourself were kind of a bad leader for a period of time. And that's kind of why I got interested in leadership, is because I kind of thrown into management. And I was terrible at it for a good bit of time, because I think that's what happens. They take someone who's pretty good at doing one job and say, hey, we're going to make you the manager of people that do that same job, but you don't realize that it's really a different job.
Completely. It's a completely different job. And I think sometimes organizations don't realize that. They don't realize that they need to equip their people differently. And I know that some companies say, okay, now that you're in leadership, here's the basic, new manager training. It's not quite the same. Your learning curve becomes quite steep. Part of why I'm passionate about the work I do is how can we shorten that learning curve? How can we start to invest in people earlier on in organizations before they're leading others, and give them the mindset and the skill set behind what leaders should reflect, so that as they start to practice that with their peers and in normal business, that they then it becomes more of that muscle memory, and then they start to refine it when they lead people versus taking all of that on at once. And so I think that's a big piece of why I've invested in this work, because I'm hoping others don't have to have the same type of struggle. The struggles can evolve and be a little different when they enter that phase.
So does that mean that you're saying that companies should probably start doing leadership training to employees that aren't managers and aren't in that leadership role yet?
Yeah, I strongly recommend that. So when I'm working with organizations, depending on what part of the work we're tackling, a big piece of the recommendation is how do you start to build your leadership pipeline earlier? And to do that means you really need to start building the skill set around ownership and accountability at a much earlier stage inside an organization. So, around your new hire training, or around people that have maybe been there for a much shorter amount of time, and do it before they even get into what some companies call the high potential tracks. Like, do it way before that. And so start investing in people and allowing them to have a mindset of leadership, which is really around accountability and ownership, and looking at driving ideas before they have to hold, a title of a leader.
Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely right. I think having ownership and accountability is one of those things that you notice when I hire people. I notice that that's lacking in some people, and it's kind of hard to get people there if they don't start out in that way. And And one of our cultural
Yeah.
norms for our team is act like an owner, is to act like you own the company. Make decisions as if you own it, take ownership in the decisions that you make, and have that moving forward.
I think that's a great one. Act like an owner. And what does that mean for people? So it's, it really is about demonstrating what it means and then really letting them know when they're not holding up that key value.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So one of the things that when I was kind of looking through some of your videos that you have on YouTube and some of the talks that you've given, you've talked a little bit about some of the differences between men and women when it comes to career opportunities, interviewing, applying for positions. And we've had some guests on the show before where we've talked a little bit about that and the lack of women in technology. And it is kind of one of those issues that I don't know. It's a sensitive subject sometimes when you talk about it, but I feel like it needs to be talked about because the only way to combat it or make things better is to talk about it. So what is your take on some of those differences, and how can maybe leaders help the situation?
So I think it is, you're right, a very important topic. It's a really rich topic. So there's a lot of dimension to it. And I think the part that I like to focus on that I think is a good starting point is where it's relevant for men and women alike. And so what I mean by that is whether, men are leading women, or, you have a wife or a sister or, a girlfriend or a daughter, the way women and men operate are different. And you should recognize that as a male leader, that there's a different level of how our norms interact, how we apply for jobs, how we network, that sort of thing. And so a lot of the talks when I'm speaking, especially to gender neutral audiences, is around statistics around a study that was done some years ago at Hewlett-Packard. And so the study was done and they looked at everybody, and the research continues to prove out. So the study was, they looked at what it took for women to apply for a job rec versus men. And what they found was that women only applied if they were 100% qualified. So if in their mind they felt like they checked all the boxes off. Men applied if they were 60% qualified. So there's two major implications from that mindset. The first is that it's not that women are going and having a conversation with their leader saying, hey, I don't check all the boxes, but do you think, I should do this anyway, right? They just take themselves out of consideration without having a conversation. Mm-hmm. The second implication is that means there's less opportunity for women to have practice and feedback, so that when the most ideal position comes along, it's they're maybe not as well equipped as a male counterpart coming in who has thrown their name in the hat more times. So if we're truly trying to operate from a place and a belief system of we want the best talent represented in our organizations and we want everybody to have an equitable ability to get there, then we really need to realize that there's these differences. And so as leaders, we then have to engage differently and have different conversations and encourage the women on our teams to talk about this stuff and to say, I do think, you're qualified for this. The job description is just a guideline. You bring a secret sauce that the team needs that's not written here. And I know you have it. And so it's shifting that conversation is really a key place. But the first part is realizing that we operate differently. That's okay. We just have to then realize that we need to engage with each other a little bit differently to make sure everybody's elevated and it has the same opportunities in that way.
Yeah, I've always, and I guess going back to being a male maybe, but I always look at a job description as kind of just a reference. Do I hit most of those? If so, then yeah, let's give it a shot. And even the full-time role that I'm at now, leading our IT group, I didn't have all of the check boxes that were on that job description, but I felt like I had enough, and I guess I interviewed well, so I got it. But I feel like that's kind of one of those things that, and I noticed it with applicants too. When I have a managerial position, I may have far fewer females applying than I do males. And do you think it's that same mindset that's causing it, or is there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, it absolutely is. And I think that we have, tying it back to the topic we were mentioning just a moment ago, more women are dropping out mid-career still. And if they're dropping out mid-career, and I'm sure tech, it's really obvious, it has a lot to do with the fact that they're not being engaged in the same way. So if we start to engage people earlier, men and women alike, we start to give them the confidence that they have the ability to actually put their name in the hat earlier, then we get to this place where we start to see more applicants coming in. But as a leader, we also have to reach out and go to people and say, hey, I think you'd be really good for this job. Have you considered it? Did you look at it? And I guarantee you that the women would probably say, oh, I did, but I didn't think I was going to be qualified for it. And then that's where the conversation has to happen. So we can't just assume, this message will permeate to every woman out there. So it really will require effort of reaching in.
No, I think it's important. And I just found, like, with my teams, having a diverse team is extremely important just for idea generation and innovation.
Yeah.
And there's so much advantages for having that diversity than, the echo chamber of just having all the same, gender, race, et cetera.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Women ask, we just ask questions differently. And men, same thing. We both bring these different skill sets and that become really quite complementary into an organization. Women tend to problem solve differently. They ask a lot more questions in different ways. And so there's a benefit there, right? There's a benefit and a balance to be found. And so it's really important to try to intentionally, foster that dynamic, which means there's extra work on the part of the leader to have to reach out and help identify some of those people that maybe aren't identifying themselves.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think it's one of the I don't know. I don't want to say it's like a requirement for leaders, but it's one of the good things for leaders to do is to try to generate that diversity, because part of our jobs in tech is to solve problems and to innovate and to be creative, come up with creative solutions. And it's much easier to do that if you have a diverse group of both men and women, people from different nationalities, different upbringings, different economical statuses, et cetera, so that you have those ideas that can all come from different areas and meld together in some new way of doing things that will improve business.
Exactly. And think about what our clients need to, are reflected, right? So whether your clients are internal or your clients are external, a user of a product you're developing, what does that user base look like? And so ideally we want our teams to reflect what our end users are looking like. And, and that's maybe not going to always be true inside an organization, but from if you're thinking of it from a consumer or business product standpoint, it absolutely is true. And so that means we have to have then that level of diversity of thought, race, gender, all that represented, because they're going to help us inform what it is that those customers are wanting from us.
And I think that's key. I actually interviewed a guy, the CTO of Doist, and he was talking about, and they're a software company. They write software for remote employees and managing remote projects and things like that. And their entire staff is remote. And he said, one of the advantages that they have is that they use their software, is that every employee uses their software. That's their core system of communication for their whole company. So being able, having the mindset of being the customer because they are the customer.
Yes. And that's such a solid mindset to have, and how you can then be more honest in a sense of what you're developing and interacting with and using it. It's really key. And I wish more organizations were thinking that way.
Yeah, me too. I think it would be a lot easier for the customers, if when they called someone from support, the person uses that product too.
Yes, definitely.
So let's talk about your book. And as I was saying before we started recording, I usually have a few weeks to check out these books that are sent to me and read them and go through them. And I got this one a couple weeks ago. And as I started to go through it, I realized that I don't have time before we were going to be talking, because it's a 12-week walkthrough with this book. Can you explain kind of what the format of the book is for the listeners that are out there, and why you decided to go in this route?
Definitely. So thank you. I'm so excited to be to talk about it as well. So it's called Successes, Failures, and Lessons Learned. And I chose the word failures intentionally because I believe when we reframe it to a definition of it being a catalyst for growth, it's really a powerful way to look at our ongoing experiences. The reason I put this 12-week guided professional journal together is because I was seeing over and over again a lot of professionals just burning out, not feeling like they were accomplishing a lot. And so it's not like a typical journal. It's very much guided towards understanding what your impact is inside a company. So I talk with employers and how they bring it into organizations, into teams. It's really an ability to get to a place of individuals on a weekly basis, setting goals, very intentional goals, working through each week, recording the successes, failures, and lessons learned from each week. And it could be big or small. It's up to you. It's what it is. And then at the end of each week, you reconcile what were the top learnings you had, what were the things that you want to adjust as you go to the week ahead. What did you not really accomplish that you wanted to? And the whole purpose of this is we are in a very, very busy business world. And the reality is that's not going to go away. Mm-hmm. And so what I was finding was that individuals, when they're trying to apply for a job, or companies, when they're trying to increase their level of engagement, they were really stalling out. And it was because people were disconnecting. And when we don't understand or feel that we have real ownership into our role and why our role matters, we end up not having an interest. We end up burning out. We end up feeling exhausted. And so the idea of this is to help build focus and confidence and accountability and ownership, and put the work into the hands of the professional. And the reason I do that is because I believe if we rely on our companies to do everything for us, we'll continue to have this gap in this leadership pipeline we were talking about. Mm. And so the more we can take it into our own hands and show we have the impact we're making, we're going to be more confident in asking for what we want. We're going to be more confident in saying, look, I want to put my name in the hat. I actually can sit down at the end of a week and say, man, I really did have some significant impact versus feeling exhausted. And so there's 3 exercises inside the book. The core one is the one I just explained. The other 2 exercises help individuals focus on their professional growth and really the behaviors and impact that they make, and what words describe them. And then the third is a selective exercise that helps individuals break down their background. And so that when they go to apply for a job, they are able to look at it from a place of their skill set, the technical background they have, the stories, examples they have. And then the fourth piece, which is most important, is that secret sauce, so that they can start to see, how do I break down my background and actually apply internally for for a position, and do it in a way that I'm showing them, what I can bring. Mm. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how well it's been received. We had tested it extensively before we put it into this format, and we continue to get great feedback from both individuals and companies alike. We're actually exploring putting it into an enterprise app that will be, a web-based app to bring this to life in a different way. So we're actually looking at that now as well.
So there are a couple of things about the book that I really liked, and that challenged me a little bit as well. I really liked the every week at the end of it, you have "This week I'm grateful for," and it had 3 blanks, and I think that's super important. Several months ago, we had AJ Jacobs on to talk about his book, 1,000 Thank Yous, and just the idea that gratitude can really affect the way you see things, the way your perspective changes on things. And I really like where that is in the book, because it's like right where you're getting ready to write what your biggest failure was for the week, you have to talk about what you're grateful for. And sometimes you find out that failure is the thing that you're most grateful for.
Exactly. And, your failure could be, the idea that you can record it means you're going to have learned from it. And then you could be, as you said, you could be grateful for the fact that, okay, I've got that awareness now I didn't have last week. Mm-hmm.
So I really like that. The thing that challenged me the most, I guess, was most difficult for me, was the section where it had boxes for you to check, of traits that where you excel.
Yes.
And that's always that's so hard to do. What are some tips that we can have to kind of maybe be better at figuring out what some of those things are that you excel without? I guess when I was doing it, I kind of felt like, am I being narcissistic by saying I'm good at this or not?
No, it's a great question. Well, you shouldn't feel that way. You should definitely feel, what are the things I really believe I reflect? But a great exercise I encourage people to do is go out to 5 individuals, you're more so your professionals. You try to limit close friends who might bias the answers, right? And go out to, 5 professionals and say, hey, what 3 words describe me in our interaction professionally? So what 3 words come to mind when you think of me? Those are really at the heart of the idea of those traits. And it's how other people see you. And you'll be surprised that it's not necessarily far off at all from what you probably think, but you get this sense of how others view you from your interactions. And it can be really eye-opening and reaffirming. And so that's a good way to do it, especially if you feel like you're challenged to decide what that should be for yourself.
No, yeah, I totally get that. I think getting that external perspective is really helpful too, because sometimes you're really good at things you don't realize it.
Yeah, exactly. And it is hard. It's hard, I think, for most people to talk about themselves, to criticize themselves, to give themselves praise for what they've done well. And that's a big piece of why this work is here that we're talking about, because we need to have a level of acceptance of ourselves in order for us to actually be able to continue to build confidence and move forward. And, at any level of profession we're at. And so it's hard to challenge ourselves in some ways. And so it's good when we can invite that outside perspective in, and that could be scary too at times, but it could be really rewarding as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's a section here that just says self-generated insights, musing, and stuff worth nothing. What was the idea behind putting that in there?
So the idea of that is just, what I encourage people to do at this point is on a week-to-week basis, fill in, stay current with your weeks through that 12-week. And I found that sometimes people want to jot extra notes. They want to jot something down that's maybe a bigger insight they had, or they wanted to think about, okay, this story in particular is something I want to take note of for when I do need to apply to my next promotion. And so it's an opportunity to capture that in the moment instead of waiting. So often, because we're so busy, we're moving through with everything being a checklist. And when we need to actually sit down and reflect back for something big and say, okay, well, what was the impact it made? Like, where did I demonstrate that? We sometimes can draw blank. And so the idea is that can help capture some of these moments that were significant in this work here.
Yeah, well, that one made me chuckle when I read the headline of stuff worth nothing.
Yeah, so I should be noting stuff worth noting. I need to go back.
Oh, it does say noting. Yeah, it does say it. I read it one way and I started laughing when I saw it. It's like, because that's what I do. I always write down notes that are really worth nothing because I never go back and look at them, And I thought, it's awesome. They put a place in there just for me.
Yeah, it's stuff.
It does say noting. You're right. I was wrong. Oh, wow.
Which may be, to you, it may be nothing, and to others, it may be something significant.
That's funny. Another thing that I really liked is the idea of intentional goal setting, because some people just write goals down because their bosses say they have to have goals. And what makes a goal different than an intentional goal?
So an intentional goal is really about alignment of where you're trying to go. So, when you look at this next 12 weeks, for example, what is it that you're really trying to move the needle on for yourself professionally? So yes, you might have a goal to produce a product in a certain amount of time, or you might have a goal that you're trying to keep everything working and functioning within, certain parameters. But the reality is what is your goal professionally? And so when you talk about it intentional, that's really something that you've honed in on and you've reflected, and you can say, okay, this is the piece I want to really be focused on. So it could be something like, maybe I want to expand the communication I have cross-functionally. And so I'm going to be really intentional about that this time of reaching across the aisle to my, my partners that I don't work with as much, but I want to engage deeper. It could be, I want to make sure that I'm more engaged as a leader and I'm more intentional in how I'm showing up for my one-on-ones with my team. And so I'm going to really focus on that. And that's going to be the place, it's the idea is it can take a form of sense of a SMART goal, the way you work through the book, but intentional is supposed to be something that's about more of that personal, professional growth that's going to drive you over these next 12 weeks.
Yeah, I like that idea. Also, I like the idea of tracking your achievements to help make a case for your next career. And that's one thing that I noticed a lot of people, like, once they check the checkbox and they achieve something, they forget about it.
Right.
And, I started doing this with my team this is at my last job, so probably 6 or 7 years ago. Started creating these annual reports. It was kind of like here's what our team did this whole year. And we'd put funny things in there too, as well as, serious things that we accomplished. And usually it was really interesting facts of things that we have achieved. And the first couple of times when I did it with my team, I asked them, I said, so tell me what you guys did this year. And it was like crickets. They couldn't remember.
Right.
They didn't know what they did. And then as we got used to doing it, and it started one of those things where, like, as we achieve something, let's drop that on our list so we already have it at the end of the year, and then we can go back and reflect on those things. And it was really important for me whenever I wanted to get my next job. I had that list and I could just drop that into my resume and fluff it up a little bit. But it didn't just have like, here's what you did for your job. It was, here are the goals that we achieved while in this role, and here's some of the successes we've had over the past few years that are noteworthy.
Yeah, we just move fast and capture that. And I think that idea of how you've been working through it with your team and for yourself is brilliant. The part of the whole concept is, sometimes we think that these achievements have to be huge, but perhaps the fact that you were able to influence a decision maker in a way that you felt was really important to be able to move something forward in the organization that might seem small was actually a huge moment. It opened up the doors to something bigger. And so that's a really important skill to be influential. And a lot of times people don't think of themselves that way. And so when you can write these things down, you can start to bubble up the themes that say, actually, I am pretty good at being able to pivot in a really difficult situation, to be to smooth it over when tensions are getting high, or to influence somebody when they're really a difficult personality. And so it's capturing those little things that then add to the bigger accomplishments, but also the skill set that you can say, I know I can really confidently come into, an organization and demonstrate these pieces because I've done it and I've been able to show it for myself.
Yeah. And also, I think you're right. It gives you that confidence that not just that, for other people, but for yourself too, because that imposter syndrome kind of, comes in and sneaks in every now and then. It makes you think that you're not capable of taking on this next job or doing this next project or even applying for something that maybe you're not 100% qualified for. If you've done something similar before, you can fall back on that.
You definitely can. And we need those little reminders because that voice in our head that informs that imposter syndrome is always there in some way. So if we put tools like the one we're discussing in place, we start to actually get ahead of it, and we can put it at bay because we can say, well, no, actually, I know I'm making impact because I'm showing it here for myself. My team is recognizing me for it. I'm learning from each piece, whether it be the success or the failure. And so you can really start to minimize that voice that tries to tell you you're not good enough. And that's really a really important key. And then in the work, you're actually transforming your behavior. You're actually building different muscle memory by doing this. And it's none of us are immune to what that little voice will try to do. And so we just have to build tools around us to help us at all these different stages of our careers.
Yeah, absolutely. So how can people find this book and how can they learn more about you? And I think you said you had a special offer for our listeners as well.
I do. Yeah, I'm really excited to share a few things. So for your listeners, if they go to the innovaregroup.com, so it's THEINNOV as in Victor, ARE.com/geek, there's a lovely landing page set there just for your listeners. It has 3 complimentary offers. So the first offer is a downloadable checklist that allows people to look at the 7 most likely causes of failed execution when you're trying to roll out strategic planning. And it's meant for all levels, whether you're leading or you're an individual contributor. And it gives some tips around that. The second is a very short video I did with powerful skill set, again, for any level of a professional. And it's about how do you implement a new initiative and get people on board and with buy-in. And so there's 3 steps I take people through that anybody can apply immediately once they see it. And then the third is a 30-minute call. If anybody's interested in learning more about the work we do here and speaking with me, I've set that up as well. And then the book will also be highlighted, and the book can also be found on Amazon and is available today. And so if you just search The Successes, Failures, and Lessons Learned by Kim Bohr, it'll pull up and you'll be able to read more about it and see what others have said about it and be able to purchase it there as well.
Absolutely. And we're going to also link up to that in the show notes, both the offer, which one of the cool things about the offer, guys, is you don't even have to put your email in at all if you don't want to. You can just check out the information for free. But if you do want to sign up, there is a link to sign up for the newsletter as well on that page. We're going to put your book on our site where we have the pages of authors that have been on here before, so we'll link to it there. And definitely check it out. It's a really cool workbook that keeps you going. It's not one of those things where you get bored doing it after a couple weeks. Now, I've only had a couple weeks into it, but so far so good.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for talking about it, and I hope that everybody gets a chance to check it out because it will really make a major impact. I'm absolutely certain.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, John, for having me. It's been a fun conversation.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Kim, and definitely check out her book. It's a great read. I got it sitting right in front of me right now, actually. And also, if you are experiencing issues with remote solutions for your company, maybe it's the first time your company's working from home or anything like that, definitely check out Splashtop at geekleader.com/Splashtop to get up to 50% off of bulk licenses and 20% off for individuals and a free 30 days. So again, geekleader.com/Splashtop.